Danny, what are you doing? Uh-huh. But you were just harassing your brother. You shouldn't do that, kitty cat, okay? I want you to be a good kitten. Just like I wish the rest of the internet to have good kittens. You too, Isin. You should be a good kitten. Oh, you are being a good kitten at the moment. The two of you have been hellions today, though. Good kitten, internet. So I just finished my role-playing game for the day, and thought I'd talk about it, because, well, what else am I going to talk about? So, this is my current role-playing setup. The laptop that you see in the back over there, that is my primary laptop now, and it's what we're using for the players that are remote. Tonight we had 2 players remote, one being my player that lives in Brazil, the other one being Creator, actually. Let me adjust this really fast. Looking down, you can see that I have my now dedicated role-playing laptop. Apparently the camera's slightly tilted, sorry about that. I have role-playing notes and looking up various D&D spells, because D&D means I actually have to reference the notes more often. I will have 1 player on one side, sitting in that chair, and 2 players sitting on the other side. I have 2 chairs there. I can't see it behind my water bottle. My water bottle is very important for role-playing, because I need to drink water while I talk a whole bunch. I'm just getting some right now, in fact. Let me pick up the phone. There. So behind the role-playing laptop will be in this case, Bucket O Chips. Always provide snacks for role-playing. Some of the players brought some snacks as well. There was a large candy bar. And there were some other snacks as well, but those have already been consumed because this is after role-playing. Other players may have cups for water and so on. I use a trackball. This should actually be over here. 1 indicates the dongle, 2 indicates Bluetooth. This laptop is set up for Bluetooth. That laptop is set up for the dongle. So I can control both laptops with the same trackball. Microphone. This is Creator's microphone. I had an identical microphone once upon a time. That got left behind in Madison for my group of role players, so they had a good microphone, because otherwise they weren't going to have one, and that would mean that I wouldn't be able to hear anything that they say whatsoever. These chairs are going to be replaced. These are actually just really cheapo, really crappy chairs that nobody likes to sit in, and they're not even. I have the other chairs that are much more comfortable. I just haven't built them because IKEA. Over here we have some role-playing supplies. This is actually just a cutting board thing, like for arts and crafts cutting. This is my Mimic. I will store dice in here and so on. If we actually had minis for players, that's where it would go. And the tongue has a little magnet in it, so it can stick up or it can stick down when it closes. Giant D20, just because. I've originally bought this to build a Raspberry Pi inside of it and then try to create an dice rolling bot inside of an actual D20. I never ended up doing it, so I just have the giant D20. Those boxes, these are actually sets of dice. These are my loner dice. So this was the green set. I have felt on the inside, so these actually work as a dice rolling surface. Basically a dice tray. 2 of them, in fact. So, oh, and there's more than enough dice for 2 players, so 2 players can share one of these boxes if they need to. I have several of these boxes around. Like, this one's blue themed. I have another black and yellow themed one, and so on. That is a Coterol. Or a curl. It's the, whatchamacallit, yeah. So this is basically a nice Don't Sue Me Wizards of the Coast version of a Displacer Beast. Tentakitty. I have an entire Tentakitty role-playing set. That's also where the Mimic comes from. And I will slowly be decorating this room with them once I actually have space instead of just having crap all over everywhere. I'm currently using my toolbox, which is actually just the box that one of my lamps came in order to put the laptop up higher. I'm actually using the webcam on the laptop at the moment, which, yeah, you can sort of see from that angle. The webcam on the laptop's actually pretty good. I'm kind of shocked. Power brick. Down there, I have a little power cube. In case if any of the players need power, I can just shuffle that further in. Just plug it into the wall. And that's the role-playing setup. Well, other than my chair. This is where I sit. I'm normally not this far back. I have the tripod up where I would normally be sitting. I like the chair. It's very comfy. Other than the fact that, one, I tend to overheat in this chair, and two, I'm a lot lower to the ground than other players. So I feel short, and I'm constantly having to sit up. So, yeah. This is exactly how I'm sitting up, is that I pick myself up and then sit in a obviously not normal person manner. Oh yeah, and I also tend to wear role-playing themed t-shirts whenever I'm running a game. I was actually originally wearing a different shirt today, except that I had so much cat hair on it, it looked gray instead of white. So, what am I playing? Or in this case, running. So I am running now the campaign's been going on for close to 6 months now, actually. I am playing a D&D game, a custom campaign world, because I don't ever reuse people's campaign worlds. This is all new for this campaign. I've called the world in my... technically it's the continent that's called Atora, but I don't have a campaign world name other than it's the Atora world campaign. Atora is a setting where everyone's a refugee or an exile or wanderer, or this isn't their homeland. There were no people originally living on Atora, and each of the groups that live there kind of came over because of some disaster or event that befell their original culture. And the interesting thing is that all of them have had different reasons for coming over. Like, for instance, let's say, for an example, the elves had a natural catastrophe and they had to sail over, otherwise there was no place for them to go. Or, in the case of the dwarves, they actually didn't have a disaster. This was a dwarven fleet that had brought over civilians and so on for some type of expedition or discovery and so on, and they lost contact with their home. Each one of the cultures there are isolated and cut off from everybody else, so they've kind of formed connections with each other. So the dwarves, being the ones that actually had military and lots of things, have kind of taken over as the primary species of Atora for purposes of power. And the campaign that I'm running starts in this tiny little village in the Dwarven Sphere of Influence, where, long story short, and this is completely spoiler-free for players, for reference, you can even look in the Discord that I have for this and scroll up and see this information. The long story short is that events have happened at the start of the game that have kind of changed everybody's outlook. Whether they no longer think that they're alone, or there's now a new power that's trying to unbalance things, or what have you. The status quo was before the start of the campaign, and the status quo has been broken. Or is being broken now, I should say. Kitty, what are you doing? So the campaign is kind of a hybrid of a discovery and exploration campaign, along with a more traditional D&D campaign of there's a big bad, go smite it. The main thing is that there isn't an obvious big bad right now. There's signs that there should be, but there's no direct evidence that there is a big bad, or that the people that the party thinks are big bads are actually big bads. Nobody knows. That's part of the fun of this campaign, is that there's no background knowledge that any of the players needed to use, although I do have one player that came in later, so it still ended up with a little bit. There's a lot of unknowns, and it's intentional that they're unknowns. It's not just... The whole concept of the campaign was that I wanted a player who had never played D&D before, or maybe had not played D&D for 20 plus years, be able to walk into the campaign and not need any background information beyond what's on their character sheet. This is supposed to be a noob-friendly game, and it has been so far. The party started at level 1, which is not something I normally do. I don't normally like low-level D&D play, but it felt appropriate for this particular setting that everybody should start at low level. The party's currently level 3, and they'll probably be leveling up to level 4 in another adventure or two. The party consists of 4 players. There is Kidatir's character, Chance, second Chance, technically, the third born. They are a divine soul sorcerer, so high charisma, in this case very low intelligence, and just try to help and be a weaver and knit things. We have Dumkas, who is that's the shortened version of Dumkas' name. That's a gnomish thief, so thief archetype of rogue. We have Uruk. Uruk is a war cleric, dwarven war cleric, I should say. And we also have Truss, who is our newest player, that is a human barbarian. So there's a lot of weirdness with this party that I kind of like, and seemingly they ended up in a relatively nasty small dungeon, relatively close to the start of the game, that they've recently come out of, that I nearly killed them 3 or 4 times. It's one of the reasons why I don't like low-level play. It's really hard to not kill players. The place was supposed to be deadly, but there's a lot of life lacking in these places. So, like, for instance, they're fighting animated statues, or they're fighting undead, or they're fighting things. They're not fighting people at the moment, although that's going to start changing soon, as the players have already figured out. And part of the mystery that's been going on is that they have found these gems. These gems are magical... bad way of phrasing it. These gems are sources of magical power. Or, as the players recently found out, batteries of magical power, that have various effects, especially when they come in contact with other gems. They also have some effects if you cast spells while holding said gems. It's effectively an alternate universe magic system, where it doesn't use the standard D&D magic item style of rules at all. It's not even close. It's intentionally supposed to feel foreign and weird and inconsistent, because nobody understands the rules of these things, because everybody who did is dead. That type of feeling, where these are effectively very worn stones of power that used to hold magic to do things like have great and powerful golems to be able to stomp everywhere, and now they're like minor animated statues that barely even hurt. So the campaign at this point is that they have figured out that one of the earlier NPCs that they encountered has gone missing. And what's more is that while this NPC has gone missing, they found evidence that this NPC might actually be a big bad, and didn't know it. I don't mean the players didn't know it, I mean the NPC themselves may not have known who they were at the time. So you have a bit of conflict going on where nobody's quite sure if this person's actually gone bad or not, or if this person even is a bad or not. They could just be a completely random bystander, and nobody's quite sure. In addition, you have weird magical artifacts that seem really powerful but very unwieldy, and they start causing bursts of wild magic when you start using them too much, because they've weakened so much over time that they can no longer hold their own energies very well. And as they get used, they get weaker and weaker over time. I find it a really interesting campaign start. I've never tried something like this before, so I think it's working. Players seem to be having fun. That's the important part. Yeah. The most recent thing that they found is that they had found a cultist. They've now encountered that the creator of those gemstones were a dragon cult. Well, I don't want to get too much into detail because the players haven't figured out why they're called a dragon cult, but they were a dragon cult, and they have now encountered one of the townspeople dressed up in a set of cultist robes, which seems to lead evidence toward somebody might be mind-controlling some people in town, maybe trying to expand their cult. maybe. And long story short, they ended up finding this cultist who had a bunch of late teen, early adulthood kids, basically, standing around him, trying to give orders. The party ended up taking out the cultist, knocking them unconscious, stripping them of clothes, because the robes seemed to have something to do with the magics involved. And the kids that were around were mind-controlled, and the moment that the cultist went down, the kids basically just started staring into space. They weren't being given orders anymore, effectively. They were still under a domination-like effect. They just couldn't do anything, so they just stood there. And eventually the party figured out that it had something to do with this plate that was underneath where they were standing. Party Barbarian dug out the plate and flipped it over, which killed the effect of the mind control. The kids all started responding. Good. Barbarian, being weird, decided to go mess around with the plate. Now, keep in mind, the Barbarian knew that the plate was magical. This particular Barbarian happens to detect magic. So the Barbarian knew it was magical and just started fiddling around with the plate. And eventually put on a cannonball on top of the plate, which disappeared. So a member of the party stood on top of the plate and disappeared. The rest of the party followed. My whole concept behind the plate was that it was supposed to be a magical artifact that when they would bring it back to town and have it identified, it'd be found that there was some type of mechanism to activate the plate's true power, which it had the ability to magically either teleport somebody to a different dimension, teleport somebody to a different landmass, teleport somebody to a different town. I'm not revealing the exact details because the players don't know either, but had the ability to move the players. And the idea is that I had like this plan for, okay, I know how they might be able to find magic word or magic ability to be able to activate it and so on. So I had that planned out in my notes, and I was thinking, okay, that's going to probably be next adventure, the adventure after, whenever they decide to do it. The Barbarian accidentally figured it out without trying to figure it out. I actually told him at the end of the game that he triggered it without trying. So I had a bare skeleton of notes for the next, that was 2.5 hours of the game today. So, I think this is something that I've mentioned before in a video, but my GMing style, game mastering, so generic term for DMing or guiding or any of the other role-playing controlling terms, my general GMing style tends to be about 20% prep, 80% improv. And I've been experimenting with trying to do more prep over the years. And I've ended up doing less prep because I will inevitably run out of time because my life is super busy and I am exhausted at all times. So I had a decent amount of this adventure prepped, and the players, while not predictable, because 3 of the players are new people to me, I've been generally able to figure out what they're about to do. This was not any of that at all. This was almost completely improvised. The little skeleton that I had gave me, okay, so they would arrive inside of a building in this town. This town is completely deserted. There is no life in the town at all, not even plants. It's a desert. It's very hot and stifling. I had a vague idea as to where they would be arriving, because they're just arriving in some random building in town. And I had a couple of structures toward the center of town. And that was it. That's all I had. I had plans to make this prettier and have better description, because one of the things I'm really bad at as a GM is giving good descriptions of places. And I did not give them a description of the outside of any of the buildings, because I don't have it. And that's not something I'm good at improvising on the spot. I can picture things in my mind and give a halfway decent description of it, but if I'm improvising, I have to continue improvising, otherwise I'm going to lose my train of thought. It's kind of like a generative linked learning model, or large learning model, or the crappy AI, where if you ask them enough questions, they'll start forgetting the earlier things in the conversation. That happens to me while I'm improvising. So, yeah. I have to make sure I finish improvising and finish my thought of improvising before I go back and try to picture things. So if a player doesn't ask me, oh, can you give me a description of this? I won't. Which is bad. This is not I'm not saying you should do it this way. This is a bad trait of mine. Also, this lighting makes me look like I have very bad bags under my eyes. Oh, that's because I actually have very big bags under my eyes. Okay. Yeah. So, role-playing seemed to have worked. I have been trying to roleplay every other week on Thursdays after work. Usually, it's about an hour after I stop working. And yeah, that's really about it. So, hope you've enjoyed this video, Internet. This is not going to be a two-part video because it's all one subject and I've talked for like 25 minutes already. So, I'll talk to you next time. Bye! Meryl? This is just going to be a kitten break. I am lumping this in with the D&D video because I'm tired and needed a break. It is smelly up here. I need to clean your litter boxes. Isin and Zone have been at each other's throats for a good chunk of the day today. Also, those are some of the statues that I recovered from my mother's collection. Anyway, I'm just going to head to bed. Have a nice night, Internet.